so.
All right. Very good. It's good to be here again tonight. Good food. I like the cook. I tell you. Very good. Oh, there we go. All right. I don't know if you had any. I just kind of jumped in, Dave. Did I jump ahead of you there?
You're fine.
Okay. All right. Well, it's good to be here and be with you guys again. Appreciate the chance to do this. It's been a great experience for me, good learning experience, and good opportunity to just share some of these things and share what God is seeming to do. We're passing around some 3x5 cards. Passing around some 3x5 cards. Did that all of a sudden get a lot louder? Yeah. Okay. I don't know what I did there. And the 3x5 cards are for you just to write some notes or some questions down tonight. I don't know that we'll remind me to collect them at the end or turn them into somebody. I don't know that we'll go over them tonight, but what I want to do is to look over just what questions you guys have. And so if you've got questions specifically for me, pretty much about anything, but also if you have questions, if you have been going through the study guide, Dave and I talked about this week a little bit about doing this because, you know, he's taking a certain perspective on Sundays. You guys are having some opportunity in some of the Sunday school classes to go a little deeper, but he's kind of covering some themes and I'm covering some themes. But if you're going through the study guide at this point, you've had a few weeks to kind of dig into it. If you've got some questions specific to things in the study guide or questions in the study guide and you're going, well, why is that there? Or why did you put that there? Or what, you know, if you write it, jot that down, make a, you know, just write down your question or reference the study guide, kind of, you know, the question in the study guide. And I'll try and look over that this week and then we'll start addressing some of those when we talk on Wednesday nights also. So that's what the 3x5 cards are for. So just kind of use that in that way. Let's go to Lord in prayer. Dear God, thank you for this opportunity, Lord. Thank you for being here, Lord. And I know you're here. Your presence is with us. Lord, I would often pray inviting you into this place, but I know you're already here. Just open our awareness to your presence. Open my awareness to what you're doing here tonight in this time together, what you're doing in each individual's life here, and not only the people that are represented here, but the people that their lives touch. I suspect in this room there are people that may be going through the study guide and finding it beneficial for them, but there also are probably people in this room that are in positions of supporting others and maybe helping others along their journey. And so I pray that you would be present in that and empower them with things that would be beneficial to those that they are reaching or in contact with. So we thank you so much for what you're doing. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so tonight, our theme tonight is going to be trusting in trust. Is what we're going to talk a little bit about. And last week the theme was the sacred breaking through the mundane is what I talked about. And the teaching point that I was trying to make last week was teaching you some things about the biopsychosocial spiritual process. Now, as you know now, I took a little different approach. I didn't try to not take a real clinical approach, but that was kind of the goal, is to kind of let you see how that process unfolds over a lifetime, looking at my family and that sort of thing. And I want to kind of extend that then today and let the theme be essentially kind of like doing a biopsychosocial spiritual evaluation and treatment planning. That's kind of my world, my bailiwick. But that's a little bit of the idea, and hopefully those dots will connect. Again, like I did last week, I'm not going to kind of give you a lengthy academic lecture on that. But if you'll think about that, maybe you'll see how I'm tying these together and begin to see the theme there. And again, my point of doing that is to give you an opportunity not only on your journey, but as you connect with other people on their journey, to begin to think about the world and their lives and how to connect and join God in what He's doing. And I won't show it to you today, maybe I will sometime. I've got a slide that I use with Sacred Space Ministries when we train our interns there at Sacred Space Ministries, and I usually don't put the slide up there until somewhere near the end because I've already got them there and they've been interns with us for quite a while, and so I know they're not going to run off and leave or something. So, but I put this slide up, and it's this very complex slide. But what I tell them is, okay, that's basically the lens through which I see the world, and it's a biopsychosocial spiritual lens. And every time I sit down with somebody, I see the world through that lens, and it's what I do and what I've trained in for years. So, you know, I hope in some ways I'm giving you some insight into that process of joining God in the lives of others and really being able to embrace the complexity of what that means. Because it is complex. One of my mentors, I may have mentioned her before, Paula Erdely was her name, a little short Jewish gal, was one of my mentors in Louisville, and she talked about that a lot. She talked about embracing the complexity, and if you really want to do this work, that phrase comes from a developmental psychologist who wrote a lot of books and did a lot of research. Her name was Selma Freiberg. But what Paula used to always teach me was, if you really want to do this work and you want to do it well, you have to be willing to embrace the complexity of what it means to be human and what it means to be in this journey of life. So I hope I give you a little bit of insight into some of that. Again, like I say, last week we talked about that the sacred breaking through the mundane, and the mundane really, in a sense, is that biological, psychological, social development. You get my point. Not that it's mundane, but it's the created world. And then we get those moments where the sacred breaks through, and that begins to turn everything on its ear. And I hope you got a glimpse of that last time. And so, again, we're going to extend that and talk about biopsychosocial, spiritual evaluation, and treatment planning. Basically, though, what we're really talking about, the starting point for that, and is sharing a cup of cold water. So we'll talk about those kinds of things. When you look at the shack, and you look at Mac's story in the shack, and you begin to go through the process of going through it in more detail, like the study guide offers a chance to do, you begin to see that Mac had some moments there, a moment where the sacred broke through the mundane. You know, all of a sudden the shack, the place where his daughter was murdered, is transformed, and there's the sacred breaking through, this spiritual experience. But Mac had trouble, with taking all of that in. I'll forget my slides here. Let me see if I can. So he said, at first, before that moment had happened, he said, this is ridiculous. I'm such an idiot to think that I hope God might actually care enough to send me a note. He looked up into the open rafters. I'm done, God, he finished. I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of trying to find you in all of this. He was done. Not a lot of sacred breaking through that, but he was struggling. He was at the end of his rope. And we all get there at times. I mean, we truly all get there at times. I have the privilege of just being in a job where I get to be there in those moments quite frequently with people, and some of you may have those opportunities too, where we get to be there in those moments where people are, at the end of their rope, and they're done, and they're done with the God, they're done with all this stuff that's not working, and they're struggling with all of those things, and they're completely done. We've had some neat opportunities to, at my office and with Sacred Space Ministries, the retreat that we did this fall, to experience some of those things and be there with people in that moment. So the sacred broke through the mundane, though, for Mac, and he had. Well, Let me read the quote. I don't know where it went in the slides, but the quote that for a little later from Mac says that this is when Mac and Papa are beginning to have their conversations, and they're in the kitchen and they're there having some conversations there, and Papa says to Mac, "It's okay, honey. You can let it all out. I know you've been hurt, and I know you're angry and confused, so go ahead and let it out. It does a soul good to let the waters run once in a while, healing waters." But while Mac could not stop the tears from filling his eyes, he was not ready to let go. Not yet. Not ready? Not ready, she responded. That's okay. We'll do things on your terms and time. That was a whole different experience of God for Mac, by the way. It's not how that was not his impression of God, being willing to do things on Mac's time and way, and being patient. God was very angry and demanding in Mac's mind. But the other point that I wanted to make from that quote was when Mac had his experience with the sacred breaking through the mundane, it did, he couldn't take it all in all at once. That didn't transform his life right there in that moment, and everything goes away and he's grand and everything's ready to go. It did not transform him. He couldn't take it all in. He was right there experiencing the reality of God, of Papa, but he couldn't manage it all. It had to come in steps and through process. Ultimately through relationship. We may talk more about it later, but that's another theme that runs all through the shack, and I think Paul did a great job of that. There's one of the quotes in there, he talks about that early on, about how that while a lot of times our hurts and our traumas come through relationships, so does our healing. But we kind of struggle with that as human beings. I mean, from the very beginning, we chose independence and separateness over relationship with God, and we still do that all the time with God and with one another. In our hurt, we tend to try to figure it out on ourselves and turn towards isolation. That's what we struggle with. And Mac was experiencing the reality of God. He was experiencing the sacred breaking through the mundane, but he was having trouble taking it all in. Remember that 5th grade boy that I talked about last time. That's me in 5th grade. My mom and I had a great time this weekend. She loved it, coming over there, and so we were digging through pictures, and I was like, "Oh, I know there's a picture of me back there in 5th grade. You got to find one somewhere." So we dug through pictures and upstairs and found that picture. And basically, that's me, caught up in this biopsychosocial developmental process, the development of the self. I was becoming a unique self, and still am becoming a unique self, but I'm a little further along than I was back then. And I shared last time about a sacred space moment for me, when the sacred broke through the mundane. I was at the end of a revival. We were Baptist, and we were doing the typical, spring revival that's in the Bible you have to have, and so we had that. And after the revival on a Sunday night, actually, I definitely felt that sense that I needed to be saved, and it was cultural. I know now, in many ways, that it was, from a biopsychosocial spiritual perspective, some of that was cultural. It was just what, but there was some of it that was also very real and very genuine for me. I experienced the reality of God and God's righteousness and those sort of things, and I had a sense of my distance or separation, and it was, it was difficult, and it was scary, and that experience was real and genuine for me. Now, after that experience, did I have it all figured out? No, not really. I had experienced a little bit of God, and that experience with the sacred and with God changed me a little bit, but I still had some stuff that I had to continue to figure out. I had a sense that we weren't so separate. That was pretty cool. And, you know, I was fortunate in my journey to also have two really loving parents and, you know, had great experiences with my siblings and all of those sort of things. So from that, my cultural experience, my psychosocial experience, I felt like God and I weren't so separate, and I had a pretty good sense that God must be pretty loving, you know? But I wanted a horse. Right? Right? I wanted a horse. And so, you know, I was at that stage in the journey here where, back to the academic part, you know, this Piaget stages of cognitive development, you know, I was somewhere in that concrete to formal operations transition, you know, and I was beginning to figure out, you know, abstract thinking, and I could handle some of those kind of things a little bit, and trying to figure out how all that worked. Well, you know, God's, at a fifth grader, God's a pretty abstract kind of, you know, trying to figure all of that out. And then that's the Erickson stages of development. These are just, I guess I should give credit to somebody, I don't know, they're just images that I pulled off of the internet, but Wikipedia, I think. I like that one though, the way it's laid out. And, you know, and so as a fifth grader, I was beginning to deal with, you know, I'd kind of been through the stages of basic trust, mistrust. I had a pretty basic sense of trust, and with that I developed a sense of hope. And I was in those stages of autonomy, or been through those stages of autonomy and shame and doubt, and had done, you know, I'd mastered that relatively well. Now, you know, I was the oldest son of the oldest son. If anybody understands what that's about, you carry a little bit of sense of shame and doubt, or I did anyway, with me for a ways, because got to do and got to have all these expectations. I was working through that, working through initiative and industry, and I was definitely in that as a fifth grader. Now, we grew up on a farm with siblings, and we were out building things and doing stuff and getting into all kinds of trouble and figuring out how to, I don't believe it. I really don't remember it. My brothers talk about lots of times that I would push them into the pond and make them walk across the pond. And I don't know. I don't really remember all that quite that way. But we were a pretty industrious group of kids running around there. And so, you know, I was starting to sort all of those kinds of things out. And again, I wanted a horse. I was trying to figure out God and all those sort of things. I was also starting to sort out the differences between my thoughts, my emotions, and my behaviors, the choices I made, and I was learning how all that worked. Now, obviously I didn't think about it the way I am right now, but that was the process of what was going on. I was sorting through those things, and that was the very beginning stages for me, I think, of beginning to sort out my thoughts and emotions and all that stuff, the psychosocial part of it, from this spiritual part, the soul, the core of me. What is that? Well, philosophers and poets write about it, theologians write about it. I'm not going to try and get into it in those terms, but just from a practical standpoint, that's where I was at. I was trying to sort all of that out. So, again, I wanted a horse. So, I remember distinctly wanting this horse, and it was around, I don't remember quite honestly if it happened right before or right after that time that I was saved and all that, but it was around that time in my life. And I remember distinctly, for some reason, going to my mom and dad's bedroom. I don't really even remember why I went in there. We didn't go into mom and dad's bedroom all that much. It may have been to get away from my brothers and my sister, I don't know, and have a little peace and quiet. But I remember distinctly going to my mom and dad's bedroom. And I remember thinking about wanting this horse, and thinking about God, well, God's supposed to, you know, a loving father, and my parents are all right, they usually give me what I want. And so I remember getting down on my knees and praying about wanting this horse.
But what I also distinctly remember, I think I even started to get up, and then I got back down, and then I worked up some good tears, because I thought, well, maybe some emotion will help this process. So I worked up some good tears while I was praying for that horse, and then I got up and I went on. And, you know, I mean, there was no horse when I walked outside, okay? Now, you know, what did happen, I did eventually get the horse. That was my first horse that I had ever got, and I learned a few things, because what God and my parents instructed me in is the value of hard work. So the prayer helped, I think, and the tears might have even helped too. But one summer in the hot sun with a weed hook about that long, if any of you know what those are, walking through the 50 acres of soybeans that my dad had and pulling out all the weeds in the rows, that earned me $50. And that $50 went to buy that horse. Topsy was that horse's name, and we did all kinds of stuff and didn't get killed in the process, which is pretty good. So, you know, I was sorting these things out, and I did get the horse, and I understood more about myself. I came to understand more about God in the process, and how things work. Now, what if you've been through a similar process, but, you know, your parents maybe weren't so loving. Maybe there was a little control and shame and blame as a theme in the environment that you grew up in. Maybe you were struggling a bit with a grandparent that was pretty controlling and demanding, and had a lot of expectations on you to be in some roles of caregiving to a parent that's not healthy, that was a little beyond your ability to do, and you struggled with that. And what if the only religion that you had grown up with, or your only religious experience, presented a God to you who's really controlling and confusing at best, or angry and mean at worst? And, you know, as a 5th grader, you're already dealing, because of maybe loss or just because of the struggles in life that you've been through, you're already dealing a little bit with Missy's question of, why is God so mean? You know, in that situation, then, you're going to have a different developmental track through this developmental process. You're going to struggle with some shame and some doubt and some guilt. Your sense of those virtues over there on the side, those virtues aren't going to be internalized. You're not going to experience them as real and permanent and something that's there. You're going to struggle with what they are, and they seem fleeting, and you're going to struggle with those things. And then you throw in the mix messed up relationships in adolescence, a couple of those into your early 20s, and then you add in a genetic predisposition to a mood disorder, and then, you know, you get somebody that's pretty hurt, isolated, and struggling. Now, I got in some of this, I'm going to show you I may show you just one piece of art from a specific patient. Now I've got a specific patient in mind. This could be any one of my patients on any given day, in a sense, but this also could be any one of us. I mean, this is the what we experience in life. This may be people that you're trying to help right now and support right now and minister to in some way, or you maybe have gone through some similar things. So what happens then? Again, I'm working towards helping you understand how I formulate these things and all that. What happens for that individual? Most of the time, they've got a few options. I mean, they begin to wall off their pain, so they just kind of wall it off, right? And they get good at that. I was talking with a young lady today that talked about that, and she's at a place that she's finally starting to kind of have some transformation and things, and I've worked with her for about 3 or 4 years, and this, like in the last 6 months, is the first time we've actually gotten below the surface at all, you know. But today she said, you know, she does yoga, and she said, you know, I was working with my yoga instructor, and she said, every time I've done, she likes doing yoga, she's done it for years, she said, every time I've done yoga, and this instructor told me the same thing this morning, she said, they always tell me, man, you're really good at kind of going under, they call it, but, you know, being, just kind of pushing everything out, and she kind of, the light bulb was going off today, where she's like, I think I know why now, because I've kind of done that my whole life. I'm like, duh. Yeah, exactly. I mean, she's really good at it. She just walls everything off, and she's really good at it. So that's definitely the approach some people take. They'll wall stuff off. They'll just kind of live in the moment. Or sometimes they'll just feel completely consumed by the pain and become really self-destructive. You know, Mac's story, Mac's great sadness. You know, Mac handled that the way a lot of typically guys, I see guys and women handle it the same way Mac did, but it's kind of prototypical guys, you know, he just keeps it buried, doesn't ever talk about it, you know, just keeps pushing through, trying to keep things moving, and doesn't ever deal with it. But, you know, it was eating him alive. And over time, he began to realize that. It was destroying him. And he began to realize that. So, this process then that we're talking about, this biopsychosocial, you know, evaluation. How does it work? And again, I'm doing this for 2 reasons. One is because I know this isn't following exactly like a study of the study guide, going through the points of the study guide, but this is how I wrote the study guide. I thought about it in this way, and I thought about, you know, okay, I love the story of the shack, and then I thought about what's the process that people go through, and what is the process that I lead people through in my office every day, and how can this story help be a vehicle for them exploring their shack and experiencing sacredness breaking through the mundane, but then also trying to keep them engaged in the process of continuing to work through it, that it doesn't just happen in the moment the sacred breaks through the mundane, everything's not fixed. Wasn't the way it happened for me as a 5th grader. It's not the way it, you know, happened, and I've had lots of other experiences with the sacred breaking through the mundane, and it still I haven't got it all figured out, you know. So that's how I'm tying this in, this is the process of going through it. Whether you're going through it yourself or you're helping someone on their journey, this is kind of the process of how it works, and understanding, embracing the complexity of all of this. So, where does it begin? Well, the patient that I was talking about, that I kind of had in mind for she and I, it began about 6 or 7 years ago. You know, she came to my office. For you, it may be just a friend or somebody that comes to you and is wanting to talk and wanting to sort through some stuff, or somebody that's coming to you at some capacity at work. And so you evaluate what's going on. I obviously have the role of specifically evaluating some things, and we did sort out some stuff with what was going on with her, and I, you know, in a sense, offered a cup of cold water. I mean, I figured out what her biological need was. I know a thing or two about that, and I had a sense of what was going on, and so we addressed that. We worked on some medication issues that she needed and that were helpful for her from a medicine standpoint. That's that cup of cold water, you know. It's like, you know, you can teach somebody a lot of theology, but if they're just dying of thirst, first thing you do is just give them a drink, you know. And so you address those immediate, just biological, physical needs, and try to respond in that way. The next thing that you do that in the process of this evaluation and treatment planning, in a sense, is you offer safety and support. That's kind of what was happening in the shack story too. You know, now you see some of that from Mac's wife and some of that from Mac's friend, Willie, that are really offering him a lot of safety and support. But then as the scene transitions into the shack, you see the Father, Son, and Spirit doing that as well. There's this sacred moment, but then there's space that's allowed. And we don't perceive God in that way a lot of times, especially when people are hurting. They don't tend to perceive God in that way. This individual that I'm talking about, she did not perceive God in that way. She saw God as very demanding, and so, you know, if God's going to show up, then, oh, holy cow, there's a lot of stuff I got to get in order, and then I better be getting it all worked out. And she's, you know, struggled with that a long time. So what we've done in my office with her is I just offer a lot of safety, support, just being there and being, you know, non-judgmental. You see that again unfolding with Mac and in that conversation with God. The next step then is, you know, well, as I said, I you know, there's some safety and support going on all the time, and then as she begins to trust me, we start trying to address the biology. That's the biological piece of that, biopsychosocial spiritual, and deal with that. Sometimes that needs to be dealt with, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we're able to step back and say, well, you know, I think the biology's okay, or maybe some other things that are going on that we need to do. The next thing that we look at is some skills, teaching some skills. In my profession, that's one of the things that it's always, even after 20 years of doing this, it still sometimes just amazes me, kind of people's perceptions, because I have lots of people come into the office sometimes even, and they've already made the decision to come and see me, but I think they have this perception, and you know, out in the community, I think a lot of people have the perception too about what counselors do is advice giving. I almost never give advice. You know, I rarely teach skills. I mean, although skills building is an important part of therapy, but that's not exactly what we do. There is a place for some teaching of skills, some skills building. You know, you see that a little bit in the shack too. You see this dialogue that's starting to unfold between Mac and, you know, and there's not a lot of like teaching of skills like I would do at the office, but there is a sense of giving Mac some space to learn how to, you know, they pray around the table, but it's different than what he's experienced before, and he's learning from them about interactions, and he is picking up some skills. Well, when you're working with someone, when you're talking with someone, and you're on this kind of a journey, that's, you know, there will be time for that. One of the best ways to organize your thoughts about skills that are helpful for people to have, all of us to have, is dialectical behavioral therapy is the term. I don't know, it's a term that's kind of a trendy term right now in therapy because it's got a lot of research and evidence base to support it, but it's just a neat way of putting together things that have been around forever, and that the four basic skill sets are mindfulness, distress tolerance, affect regulation, and mindfulness, distress tolerance, affect regulation, and communication, interpersonal communication. And so, you know, that's the psychosocial piece. Now, this is where I'm going. I didn't really make slides of all this, but that's where I'm going. You know, the biological piece, I may work on with medications or whatever, or a cup of cold water. The psychosocial piece, the psychological piece and the social piece, you know, you may teach some skills, help them learn how to be more present and mindful, more in the moment, not overwhelmed by their emotions as much. You may teach them some distress tolerance skills. You may, you know, help them with those kinds of things in a skills building kind of way. But the more important thing in the process, because that's where, I mean, that's an important part of any time you're counseling or helping someone along the way, but the more important thing in the process is that you become a guide and you become a guide to a healing journey. That was my original title of the study guide. They wanted to call it the Shack Study Guide. I thought that wasn't very creative, but it's like, whatever. It's, my original title was a guide to a healing journey, your guide to a healing journey. That's when it gets fun. I wish I could say I was at that place with everybody that walked into my office. I'm not. A lot of times I'm just treating the biology and I'm teaching some skills, and that's as far as it goes. But I do get an opportunity to go deeper with a lot of folks. And this individual that we're talking about, we've gone to this place where we really, now my role is more of a guide on this healing journey. So let me tell you a little more about that process with her. And she knows that I'm talking about this, and I'm, again, this is not trying to reveal anything because this could fit for anybody in Southeast Missouri. So, the process that we went through, it's been about a 6-year process. And again, remember, Paul says what he wrote about in the shack that happened to Mac in a weekend happened. He said all that transformation and all those conversations with God happened to him, but they happened over 14 years. And that is more typical. When people are really willing to go to these deep places, that's more typical of what I see. It's a journey. This individual, about 6 years ago, and she came to me, and so we went through the process. We got our biology kind of stabilized, and we built trust and support, and she began to kind of experience that process, and she began to trust me to do more than just teach her things, but to be a guide on a journey. And as that journey has unfolded, then, I had the privilege of being able to, in a sense, walk the journey with her. So one of the first things that you run into when you're walking the journey with somebody is, well, darn, Dave, I think in the transition, I didn't email those to him. Well, I did email them this morning, but it didn't go through. So we were scrambling to get them transitioned over back there, and I thought we were in shape. But anyway, that's fine. I was going to read you from Galatians, because when you're walking the journey with somebody, and if you're really willing to go deep with them, then one of the very first things that you're going to run into is you've got to be able to deal with boundary things, and boundary issues, and sorting that out. And one of the best boundary scriptures I love is in Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 through about 5. It says, "Brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore them gently. But watch yourself, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Each one should test his own actions, then he can take pride in himself without comparing himself to anybody else, for each one should carry his own load." That's a little contradictory. That's if you, at first glance, if you just look at those two statements there, well, carry each other's burdens, each one should carry his own load. A little bit contradictory. But what that is really talking about is boundaries. It's this process, and it's a very deeply relational process. It's a process that you see in the shack between the Father, Son, and Spirit that Mac had not really experienced before. It's other-centered. It's self-giving. There's no reduction of the self. It's not that when you give of yourself, you don't become less of a person. Your uniqueness doesn't diminish, but you give of yourself. So it's other-centered. It's loving. It's giving. You see that in that statement. And you do help and support and bear one another's burdens. But you also take ownership and responsibility for yourself, and you carry your own load. I've often heard it preachers preach on this sometimes, and I've heard it preached that I don't know the original language, but I've heard it preached that the two different loads and burdens are being talked about are, everybody should pitch in to carry. If there's you're on the journey of life and there's a boulder that's in the road, you pitch in and help.
but everybody's got to carry their own backpack. You know, it doesn't work. I mean, and I see this all the time. I see people, I see parents, I see spouses, I see kids. I dealt with a 15-year-old girl today. Well, it's one of the girls that I was talking about, the guy in the nail hole. I was talking with her today. I mean, she's in a parentified role. I mean, she's got, you know, some stuff going on that, and we were talking about the fact that, you know, you can't carry all of this. You can't fix all this. I know you want to, but it doesn't work. You can't carry somebody else's responsibilities in life. It just doesn't work. So the young lady, the one I've been working with for the last 6 years, a young adult, we've done this boundary thing for a while. It took us quite a while because she would, you know, want stuff and she would kind of try and push past the boundaries, and I'd have to kind of set the boundaries again, and we would go through this process and still creating safety and offering her a cup of cold water and offering support and kind of non-judgmental presence. And then, and as you're doing all of that, you know, I mean, you talk about a lot of stuff. You're setting the boundaries and you're talking about a lot of stuff. That's what therapy would call the difference between process and content. The who shot John is what I call it. And the who shot John is important. You don't need to, you know, I don't want to minimize it when I'm working with somebody. And so if you're working with people, don't minimize the who shot John. The who shot John's important, but not really. Okay? I mean, it's because once you've worked with somebody long enough and then you begin to get them to realize, oh, we were talking about that a year ago with this person in these circumstances, and now we're talking about it with this person in these circumstances, and you know what? That's really the same thing going on again. This isn't a whole new deal. You're kind of repeating the same cycle over and over again, and so you think you might ought to look at that and do that differently, and so that's process content stuff, and that's some of what we were working on. We've been working on that takes a while. That takes quite a while. So we were in this place where we were doing all this work, and about 6 months ago. And I mean, again, this has gone on for about 6 years, and it's not like I was seeing her every week. I'd see her once a month, once every couple of months, for a while, once every 3 months, when we were just doing medicines, and she was fine and all that. You know, but then she got, in the last year and a half, 2 years, she got to where she made the choice. She wanted to come in a little more frequently, so I see her about once every 3 to 4 weeks. She wanted to come in more frequently and dig a little deeper in some of this. And we had one of those moments where it was a boundary moment because she really wanted me to friend her on Facebook. And I was like, you know, I'm not your friend. And I said that. I'm not your friend. Oh my gosh. Absolutely crushed her. Absolutely crushed her. And just, you know, very difficult for her. She was mad at me for a couple of sessions, which was a couple of months, and mad and frustrated, but she hung in there with me. And we worked through it, we talked about it, and here's how we got there. I said to her, well, why is this so important to you? Because she wouldn't let it go. She kept coming back to me, she wouldn't let it go. Why is this so important to you? Well, when you said you weren't my friend, you know, I thought that I wasn't important to you, and blah, 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 and we talked about that. No, you're very important to me. And this process that we're experiencing is very important to me. So we talked through that a little bit, and then I said to her, tell me what you're feeling when you come in here, when you're sitting in here, and this process is so important to you. What are you feeling? And she thought about it a minute, and she said, you know, when I'm here with you, I feel trust. I trust this. And we begin to talk about that. And we begin to go through the whole biopsychosocial stuff. That was a new experience for her in relationships with anybody, but especially with a guy. She said, I feel trust. And I said, you know,
did you bring that with you when you came to see me 6 years ago, or how long it's been? No, she didn't trust me then at all. And I said, I didn't bring it with me either. I didn't walk into this room and just trust you. I mean, I had a certain sense of, being okay with people because I've done this kind of work for years, and I feel okay with the process. I didn't know you. And she began to get it. And that day she said to me, she said that she felt, I literally put it in the room, and I may have talked about this the other day. That's when the moment when I wrote trust down and threw it on the floor over here. She always sits over there, so it was over here. I said, you didn't bring it in the room, I didn't bring it in the room. How the heck did that get here? And where did that come from? And we began to talk about trusting and trust. And she began to experience that as something bigger. And not only, and so for her, this wasn't Mac's moment where the snow melts away around the shack and Papa gives him a big hug. But for her, it was probably one of the first times in her life that she began to think about something that was transcendent. That, okay, wow, wait a minute, this trust thing isn't just a feeling that I generate and create, or that there's something about it that's bigger, and so we began to work on trusting and trust, trusting and trust, trusting and trust, and that began to be the theme every time we were doing the Who Shot John, and we were still doing that, a lot. And again, I don't mean to say that to discount it, but I say that to make the point that you're looking at all of those things, and you're teaching skills, and you're helping them sort through all of that, but you're also looking at those deeper level processes that are going on. And so we were doing the Who Shot John, and we would come back to, well, how does did you feel some of that trust? Yeah, I really have been. I've been feeling a deeper sense of trust when I deal with situations, with kids or with adults, and I'm dealing with things. I have this deeper sense of trust as a presence with me. Oh, really? How's that changing things for you? And then we began to talk about hope, because she began to, and I wrote that down one day and threw it beside the thing that says trust. Actually, yesterday, she was at the office, and we were talking about this, and she pulled those out. That was like a year ago, probably. We were talking about this, and she pulled this thing out of her purse and unfolds it and lays it down, and it was trust and hope. She said, yeah, they're always with me. I said, really? That's cool. Because she's beginning to experience those as transcendent realities that are with her. And the coolest moment there for us was just not that long ago, and I may have shared this the other day, but it was a cool moment. Because, again, her view of God, now she grew up with a lot of religion, but the religion informed her about a God who, if he was there, was pretty demanding and mean and angry, and she had a lot of missy questions, right? But the other day, she was talking about this, and we were talking about trust and hoping in hope, and I've intentionally not gone towards God things, because she's been upfront about that. She doesn't want to go there, and when she does, she gets all confused and turned into knots, and she's like, we actually dealt with that just this week a little bit, which I might talk more about. I haven't gone there. I haven't named this thing for her, because anytime she does, if you bring up God, she goes right into that intellectual religion stuff, and she gets all tied up in knots about it. But the other day she was saying, we were talking about this trusting and trust and hoping and hope, and she said, maybe that's kind of like God. Could be. That's about all I said. And it's like, yeah, you think? Okay. But it is beginning to transform her life. That's the point. All of this stuff, for Mac in the story, for Paul in his life before he wrote, this doesn't mean anything if it doesn't go anywhere. But when it does, and she really is feeling it go places. She has dealt with some things and dealt with some family issues in the last year that she could not have dealt with before. And it's going places. It is really transforming her life because she's beginning to experience these transcendent realities. Now, the rest of the story, when I put this together, I hadn't had this meeting with her, but I met with her just this week, and the rest of the story too, just about that she's kind of still working out, and the kind of epiphany that she had this week was she's kind of beginning to figure out a little bit more about why she can't go there with this stuff of God, and it's got to do with just, that guilt and shame, those basic trust, mistrust, all those things that never got really sorted out. Anytime she talks about God, she will work really hard to follow the rules, but then there's this voice of shame that is so intense in her head that it just beats her down. And so then she just throws up her hands and is just like, heck with that, I don't even want to go there, I can't even figure it all out. She has multiple times, sort of like Mac had, where in the shack where she's just like, I can't do this anymore, I'm not, and so she just throws up her hands and doesn't want to go there. And that's the big dilemma and epiphany that she had this week. She's beginning to realize the cycle of that, how prominent that is. I mean, it just happens, used to happen every day, now it's happening 2 or 3 times a week, where she'll kind of go into that guilt and shame and try and figure something out, and I'm supposed to be doing this, and to be a good person, or to be a good mom, or to be a good wife, or to be a good this, or to be a good that, or blah, 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 and then she just falls apart. But she's not going there anymore. So that is kind of where I'm at, and I'm going to leave it there, I think, pretty well for you. And again, I hope that the stories are starting to make sense. I'm not trying to kind of give you truly like, a crash course in therapy in a sense, but I am kind of giving you the underpinnings of the study guide and why and how I wrote it and why and how I see the world. And maybe that's helpful. Hopefully that's helpful on your journey as you're going through the study guide, or as you're helping other people with their journeys. That's one of the things that we are excited about. In some ways, that's one of the things that I'm most excited about. And Paul's talked about that too. The thing we're most excited about is the study guide. I mean, I'm glad churches are using it. We've gotten some feedback that other churches are using it for things leading up to the movie, and Sunday school classes are using it and all that. But where I'm really the most excited about it is if this study guide can increasingly become a tool that you can sit down with and go through yourself, that's great. But also, if you can sit down and be a spiritual mentor for someone over the next few years as they slowly go through their journey in the shack and maybe use the study guide as a part of that, then that's what excites me. And so that's why I kind of want to give you a little bit of the way I think and the way I see these things and the way I see these things unfold, and how, you do kind of have to embrace the complexity of it. I mean, I could talk all night about the complexities of that one case and give you more and more stories about what went on in her life and what's gone on in our sessions over the last 6 years. It is complex. There's a lot of biology that we're dealing with. She does have the genetic family history of a mood disorder, and that is one of the things she was dealing with a parent who had a mood disorder. And so then you see the complexity of her biology she genetically inherited, because if you have a first-degree relative with a truly severe mood disorder, not situational depression, but a truly severe clinical mood disorder, you've got a first-degree relative with that, then you've got about a 25 to 30% chance of having that yourself. So she's got the genetics of it, but that's also the issue. Remember the grandpa who was really putting a lot of pressure on her to take care of her mom when she was little. So then there's all these mixed up beliefs about, who I am, and if I'm sick, then am I going to turn out like mom, and are my kids going to have to take care of me, and and it gets all twisted. and we're just unraveling the complexity of it. And you do it just with nurturing support, healthy boundaries, a willingness to go into these spiritual places, and a willingness to allow God to be present. That's, I guess, part of the main point, too, I want to make sure I'm making here with this, because that's the whole point. Joe's back there again. That's Joanna Pincosi back there. Steve's our director of Sacred Space Ministries. That's part of the whole point of Sacred Space Ministries, and what we teach there, and why we even use that phrase, sacred space, because I believe that that's all we actually ever do in this life, is we create relational space. And if we create safe relational space, then I believe God always shows up. God is always at the door knocking. God always shows up because He's always there. And so my job then becomes just being aware of it. And that's what happened with this lady. That's what was really going on. You know, she thought I was being mean when I said, I'm not your friend. And certainly lots of therapists use that phrase because they're a little hesitant about, they want to keep boundaries with their patients and all that. No, I was using that phrase because I wanted her to make sure that she understood, I'm just a guy. I didn't bring any healing into this room. I don't have that. And because we've been able to do that dance, and we've created a safe space, now she's beginning to go, wow, what is that in the room then? Because I feel it. It's real. Yeah, heck yeah, it's real. And maybe it's God. That's kind of where she was at. Yeah, I think it's God. And one thing, and I will wrap up. I do want to emphasize too, with this group now, I am really, one of the things that, there's two kind of arguments, there's probably tons of arguments, but two concerns that have been raised about the shack over the years. Paul's gotten, lots of flack. One is God being a big black woman, okay? Well, okay, I think people hopefully most people can see through that and see that that was a vehicle to help throw people off and help people kind of get outside of their, God may or may not be a big black, woman, but God's probably not a big, white Anglo guy either. So hopefully most people can see through that. The bigger, I think, theological dilemma for most folks with the shack is the struggle of, is this talking about some sort of universalism and kind of whatever, and I get that there's reasons to. I've asked Paul those questions, but for me, myself, when I'm talking about this, I want to make clear, I guess, kind of where I'm at. Now, when I'm working with a patient, like that I was just talking about, I don't feel like I have to tell her who trust and hope is. I think she's going to experience it for herself because I think God is actively pursuing her heart. Now, for me, I believe that is the reality of Christ in the world, and so I don't think that, you see people, coexist, or I saw one person had a bumper sticker, I believe in the metaphor. I use a lot of metaphor in what I do, and metaphor is powerful, but I don't believe in the metaphor. I believe in the presence that is actively pursuing the heart of people and using all kinds of metaphors to get there, all kinds of, moments of the sacred breaking through the mundane and all sorts of things like that. That's what I believe and what I see exactly is the reality of Christ showing up in people's lives. And sometimes people take a while figuring that out, who that really is. That's the process. I hope that's helpful. And we'll pick up these cards and I'll look over them. We're going to continue kind of this process of these kind of conversations. I want to try and dig in a little more to how the process unfolds for people with some case examples of when it starts to go deeper. Because again, like my patient that I'm talking about tonight, and like Mac early on, just beginning to scratch the surface of trusting and trust.
But now what begins to happen when you start to realize that this trust and this hope is real and active and relational? Oh, okay. Now I've got some questions for him, and that's where Mac was at in the midsection of that. A lot of questions for God, like what the heck? And I always encourage people to ask lots of questions of God. God's not afraid of your questions, and that's somewhere where we may go the next session or two. And that's why I want you guys to throw out questions too. So thanks for coming. I appreciate it.